Greetings. Welcome to this installment of Intro to Business. So this is chapter 6, the chapter on management and leadership. Actually, this chapter is trying to pack a lot of stuff. Often you will find that management and leadership have their own chapters, but we're going to try to keep it succinct. Again, this is Intro to Business. Most of you are enrolled in this class because you're considering being a business major. And many of you already know you're a business major. Remember, we talked about this umbrella of business administration, and there are many subcomponents to this umbrella: accounting, finance, marketing, management, international business, etc. And so management definitely is a huge part of business administration for those of you who are interested. And within that umbrella, there are a lot of other areas, right? So you'll have leadership actually is one, small business management is one, entrepreneurship, there's strategy, there's international management. There are a lot of subcomponents to that. So this is a critical chapter for those of you who are still not sure what major you want and are thinking this might be one of them. So before I start, we'll go over the outline for the class. I want you to think about a boss that you have now or you've had in the past, or it could even be a coach for those of you who are in sports. And I want to ask you the following question. Imagine that, let's go with a boss. Imagine that this boss of yours comes up to you and says, look, we're struggling, we're financially not doing well, we're on the block, and we're asking employees to consider donating part of their time. You know, we realize you're working X amount of hours. If you could, fill out this form, we'll give it to HR, and legally donate a couple hours here and there. We think the company can survive. I want to ask some of you to think how many of you would do it and how many of you would not do it. So for those of you who answered you wouldn't do it, I want you to kind of think about a few words that describe this boss, this manager, and why you would not want to do this. And for those of you who said you would do it, same question. What is it about them? And that's also why I brought up a coach. Great coaches will push you to do more than you think you're capable of. Great leaders, this is about leadership, will inspire you to do more, to perform to a greater level than you thought you would be capable. So I'd like to start with this little intro for you to consider and just remember how critical this is. Next time you go to a bookstore and you look in the business section, look at the section on leadership. It's always one of the biggest sections in business. And there's a reason. If you think about a leader and inspiring others to perform, that is worth a lot more than some people will say 4 or 5 managers. So just remember that. And then ask yourself, are you a leader? Do you have leadership capabilities? Are you developing them? As a person, as a student, as a colleague, in your family, etc. All right, so let's get going. Same as always, this right here, if you want to have it, you click on it, and it will take you directly to this webpage here, the Intro to Business Planning chapter for the zero-cost book we're using for this class. And then also here, this is just the intro book right there. All right, so we'll look at various. I'm not covering everything in the chapter. I don't want this lecture to take more than it has to. So I'm focusing on the real critical elements. Again, for those of you who are going to take my class in management, already took it, we spend a whole semester focusing into way more depth. So the role of management, we're going to look at that. The 4 types of planning, we're going to look at that. The primary functions of managers in organizing various activities, how they organize themselves, how they, what are the functions that they have based on tasks. I'm not going to spend as much as I could with this. There's a lot more on this topic. I'll just give you really just kind of like the meat and bones. Leadership styles and how they influence corporate culture. That's going to be huge. How do organizations control activities? Imagine a company where perhaps you have a leader that is very inspiring, but just really unable to organize. And so you can have these great, inspiring, speeches, but if there's not a level of organization behind it, you're not going to go anywhere. Well, what roles do managers take on in different organizational settings? We're going to look at that. And what skills are necessary for managerial success? There was one last, is number 8 in the book. I took it out, which was modern skills required for managers. And the reason I took it out is because I'll embed that throughout the presentation. All right. So the role of management. We have our basic definition here: the process of guiding the development, maintenance, and allocation of resources to attain organizational roles. So a couple things here. If you look at that sentence very carefully, you're looking at kind of like an input and output scenario, right? It's a process of guiding the development, the maintenance, and the allocation of resources to attain an organizational goal. What I did here is I just got a couple of pictures. And the reason I have these pictures is because this is like a fundamental way of grasping or understanding what management is today. When you start to study management or business, you go, and we always start with the basics. We start, with Max Weber, German sociologist who in the early 1900s created what we know today as bureaucracy. It's the father of bureaucracy. And then, things like that, when you think today, well, I thought bureaucracy was bad. I thought bureaucracy slows everything down. You think about red tape and you think about bureaucracy. It's true that bureaucracy today is just a horrible word. You have to go back to the context of the late early 1900s, and then what you see then is an environment that is extremely predictable. There's no internet, there's no globalization. Most people will never see more than maybe 3 or 4 people from another country in their entire life. They maybe don't travel very far, just maybe neighboring countries. They certainly don't go to another continent, most people. And so if you think about that, kind of like the visual is a ship. If I could have a ship here with a bunch of people working on the ship, and they have to work together to, cast the sails, or if it's a big giant rowboat, the rowing. But this ship is going slow, and it's going in one direction consistently on a very calm body of water. And the reason it's a calm body of water is because, again, things are extremely predictable, because things are happening slowly. The world is huge. The world is huge. You never get to go anywhere beyond your little area on the world. You don't meet someone from the other side of the world. You don't know anything. That's the time we're talking about. And of course, if you have a big, ginormous bureaucratic company, you're going to do really well in that environment. You can have all the bureaucracy you want. It's going to be optimal for that environment. So what I have here for you is, as you can see, a way smaller operation over here. You have maybe imagine thousands of people or hundreds, whatever is kind of the visual that you have with these huge corporations, or even just big companies in the early 1900s. Today, 2019, you have very small, nimble, lean operations. But look at the environment, the external environment. It is extremely dynamic. And it's extremely dynamic because of, again, globalization, technology, competition, direct, indirect competition, substitute product, all these things, you just don't even see them coming. So you're trying to do several things at the same time. You're trying to stay alive, first of all, but also you're trying to steer at the same time that you're trying not to get killed. So today the analogy for business really is like whitewater rafting. It's moving at the speed of light, and all you're trying to do is you're permanently adapting to the environment, right? So the current managerial process is staying flexible and adaptable in a dynamic technological and global environment via planning, organizing, and controlling. I kind of modified the author's description here based on that concept. No matter what, whether you're talking about a large organization that's a little bit more slow and bureaucratic, or the lean and mean, which is really the way to go today, everybody always has to be aligned to the same objective. We're all doing this job here wherever we work with the same aim, with the same goal for the company, whatever the mission statement of the company is. So I want you to just always kind of keep that in mind. North. Am I going north? Are all of the 60 employees, 600 employees, or 6,000 employees, are we all showing up today to work and doing what we need to do, and remembering that we are pointing north? We're all pointing the same way, right? All right. So the role of management, we have two things going on. We have efficiency and effectiveness, right? Efficiency is using the least possible amount of resources to get work done, right? So the example from the textbook here is about Delta and how Delta has managed to be uber efficient. In 2016, Delta operated a revenue of 12.15 cents per seat mile, which is the revenue the company makes on one seat occupied or not, the distance of 1 mile. And so that year they were number one, and that made them the most efficient, if that makes sense. You guys have all heard of course, Elon Musk and Tesla and the Gigafactory, right? So what's fascinating about the Gigafactory is that Elon Musk, Tesla, in conjunction with Panasonic, the batteries that are made there are made in conjunction with Panasonic. So this is the plant, the Gigafactory plant in Reno, Nevada. It is just astoundingly massive, right? In fact, here. So this is kind of giving you an idea of the size or the scale. What Elon Musk is going for is scale. Is, think scalability. And so here's the Tesla Gigafactory. Here's the tallest building in the world. Tokyo Tower, Sky Tower. I mean, it is the biggest building. The Boeing, one of the Boeing buildings, I have been told, or there's somewhere a reference to it, was or still is, I don't remember, one of the comparable buildings, but they make airplanes there. The reason I'm telling you about this is because what happens here is that Elon Musk is now making more batteries, electric batteries, for Tesla cars in conjunction with Panasonic at the Gigafactory in Reno, Nevada. He is making more electric batteries for those cars than all competitors combined. Just think about that for a second. You take all of the other companies that make electric batteries for cars, he makes more than they do combined. The reason he created the Gigafactory was to accomplish insane economies of scales. He's going for scalability, and so thereby, he is far more efficient than any of his competitors. It's fascinating to see what's going to happen to that industry, because he's driving up the cost down of electric batteries. And of course, batteries have their own equivalent of Moore's law, where they're getting cheaper and also allowing you to go farther every couple months. All right, effectiveness is really straightforward. Effectiveness is the ability to produce a desired result. The way that I like to explain effectiveness is just very simple. Are you getting the work done? That's it. So if one company requires 5 workers for the one output, and the other company requires 3 workers for the same output, they're both effective. They're both creating output, but one is more efficient. The one with the 3 workers is more efficient than the one with the 5 workers. And one more thing, when you think about efficiency, you're thinking about resources. People are a resource. Workers are a resource. Time is a resource. Money is a resource. So when you think about efficiency, think about all these things. All right. Let's see here. Planning. All right. I did a screenshot of your author's table 6.2. It's just easier that way to kind of go over this. So planning, when you look at planning, you're deciding what needs to be done to achieve the objective of the company and identify when and how it will be done and who should do it, right? So we're going to keep planning as straightforward as we can. You for sure need to remember and you need to understand, memorize the definitions in the book for strategic planning, tactical planning, and operational planning. Let's start those three. We'll also for sure you'll have to know what contingency planning is. But let's start with the strategic, tactical, and operational. Strategic is very straightforward. Strategic is always going to be at the top of the company, right? So the people who set up the big plan, the big picture, the big vision for the company 1 to 5 years out is going to be top management, right? So it's a C-suite, CEO, COO, all that stuff, directors, division heads. In terms of the extent of coverage, you're looking at the external environment and the entire organization. That's what it addresses. And the purpose and goal is to establish the mission and long-term goal, right? It's broad, it's general, and there's a high degree of uncertainty. Remember what I did with the first slide when I showed you that whitewater raft. Remember that the name of the game is to be flexible and adaptable to change, live 24/7. And so a good strategic plan has built-in features for flexibility and adaptability. And then so right below that, we'll go to the tactical plan. So that's middle management, right? Tactical plan, less than 1 year. And so you're talking about strategic business units. Strategic business units is a word we use in business to basically talk about the different divisions of a company. If we're using General Electric, for example, and we remember that GE, well, used to have an appliance division, refrigerators, all that stuff. They sold it to a Chinese company called Haier. And then they also have the GE engines, the jet engines, right? They're one of the top producers of jet engines in the world. They also make these multi-million-dollar healthcare equipment. You think about going to the hospital and you get a CT scan or a CAT scan or any of that stuff. They do that. They do software for hospitals. They do hardware, connectivity, everything. Imagine running a company like that, right? And so we're talking about each of these divisions. We call them strategic business units. Establish mid-range goals for implementation. The breadth and depth of the components are more specific, and there's a moderate degree of certainty. And then we go to the line. Now we're going to the line management or supervisory management. And the time frame is the now, right? This is what people usually refer to as the boots on the ground, where it happens. The people who have to articulate the tactical plan within their own day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month operational plan. They implement and activate specific objectives, a reasonable degree of certainty. Think about, things are kind of slowing down a little bit. I think in the last lecture we talked about some of the indices, the consumer price index. We looked at the consumer confidence, the CEO confidence from the conference board. I think each was down about 10 points. And so what's happening with a lot of companies, they have decisions to make right now. And if they're manufacturing a type of product and demand's gone down by 10 or 20%, what they have to do operationally, they have to decide what's the smart play in terms of reorganizing the assembly line. We're not going to focus on making a product that is decreasing in sales. So instead, let's see how we can rework our factory and try to implement production of something that is more in demand or will be in the future if we can afford it. All right, the contingency plan. I'm a big fan of Ken Chenault. He was really a fantastic CEO, beloved CEO of American Express. And I'm giving you this example. I mean, in this case, the operational plan sorry, the contingency, remember, is a top and a middle management, right? And so Ken Chenault is a fascinating guy. When he was at American Express, and a lot of people give him credit for having saved American Express as he was there during September 11th. He was the CEO and chairman of American Express for 2001 to 2018. And what's interesting about Ken Chenault is that he was, prior to being the CEO, so there it is, of American Express, he was the COO of American Express. He was a chief operating officer. And here it is. So he became president and COO in 1997 and became CEO in 2001. And this had a lot to do with the work he did for American Express in contingency planning that helped the company survive the disaster of September 11th. Remember, the company occupied several floors in the Twin Towers, and his planning, helped the company overcome that. Tragedy strikes, and everybody is sympathetic and empathetic, and yet people are still going to be very concerned if the financial institution with which they have their money is not picking up the phone. The computers are down, and confidence. Remember, confidence is the name of the game when it comes to investing. And if you lose confidence in a financial institution, regardless of the reasons, that financial institution will have issues. So Ken Chenault was instrumental in driving American Express to where it is today, and a real leader in his company. All right, so organizing. Now we've just talked about planning. We're going into organizing, the process of coordinating and allocating a firm's resource in order to carry out its plans. Before I go further, I want to remind you that it's always a really good idea after you take your first exam and you have a plan, and your plan was to ace the exam, let's assume, and let's say you got a C, right? And you try to see what happened. Did I study? Did I not? Where did I go wrong? Etc. And this is where you have to really kind of take a few steps back and organize your life, or reorganize your life. Are you planning enough time to study? Are you having the right priorities, etc.? So maybe you have to reprioritize. And so that's really critical to you as students for these four functions of management that we're going over: plan, organize, lead, control. But organize. I know all of you have smartphones, and it's really intriguing for me to see sometimes my students miss an exam because they just forgot and they have to incur a penalty. But I know they have their phones with them, and they have been made aware of exam dates the first day of class. So I always advise my students, when you go over the syllabus for all of your classes, make sure that you put that stuff in your phone and just organize yourselves accordingly, right? So have a reminder the week prior to an exam and allocate time. All right, so organizing includes developing a structure for the people, position, departments, and activities within the firm. What we have here again is we have just a kind of like a pyramid representing an organizational chart. So again, at the very, very top of the organization, you have less people at the very top, the CEO, CFO, CO, CIO, so Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Information Officer, Chief Information Officer becoming more and more important. President, the Governor, General, each company has a different structure, but basically this is what we have. We call the C-suite, all these CEOs, we call that the C-suite. And then just beneath them, the middle managers, so this is where you have your division managers, regional, etc. And then the supervisory or line manager, you can call them whatever you want. First line manager or line manager is what's common. Supervisory managers, these are your soldiers, your boots on the ground, your They're getting without them, you don't have a business, right? They run the things that make the things that you sell. They organize everything, transportation, logistics. Without very strong line management, you don't have a lot. Okay, so now that we've looked at planning and organizing, what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate them. This is not in your book. I'm going to talk about it, well, not in this class. We're done now for this chapter. But when you study more planning and strategy, this is kind of the essence of how to understand it, graphically. Remember we talked about north. So this arrow is representing north, and north is always going to be aligned to the vision and the mission of the company. The vision of the company is a very broad statement about what the company aspires to be, in the eyes of its stakeholders. The mission is a little bit more specific now: who we are, why we're here, where we're going, and how we're going to do it. The mission statement is critical. Some companies don't have vision statements. Many that actually don't. But most companies have a mission statement. Some actually don't. They advertise that they don't need one. But mission statement is critical for everybody to truly have an understanding of what's the priority. So here at Chaffey College, for example, if you ever look at our mission statement, the students, you guys, you're the heart of everything. If there's a debate, an argument in some committee meeting, and there's two opposing views about what should be done, myself, I sit back and always ask myself, well, which of these two ideas is most aligned with support for the students? And sometimes there is a clear one, other times it's a little bit more murky. But it's just such a great way to keep everybody in check and remind everyone that, remember that your personal interests take a back seat to why you're here, right? You're getting paid to do a specific thing, and in this case it's to help the company grow, move forward, whatever, and you get to know what that is based on having an understanding of what the mission statement is. So what do we have then? The upper management strategic plan. That strategic plan, we just went over it, supports the mission, and the mission supports the vision. That's upper management creating and modifying sometimes the strategic plan. Just beneath that, middle management, they create the tactical plan. The tactical plan supports the strategic plan. And then at the bottom here, we have the line management, first line management, and they have the operational plan. Operational plan supports tactical plan. Tactical plan supports strategic plan. All plans must be aligned to the vision and the mission of the company. I hope that helps. All right, leading, guiding, and motivating others. I can't help myself. I studied him when I was in college, and I really just was so blown away by this guy. His name was Herb Keller, and he was when I was in college back in the dark ages, the textbooks, he was a big feature in all of the management textbooks because he did some stuff that was just really visionary. And so his name will always come up as this really interesting, funny, free-spirited, doesn't take himself too seriously, brilliant strategists who help turn Southwest Airlines into what it is today, right? Herb Keller. And that's him here, being goofy with another CEO. And they were just messing around a couple years after they had retired for an interview. Herb Keller, comedian, clown. He died recently, but he really is the guy who absolutely revolutionized the airline business with what he did. You probably remember that show, Undercover Boss, right? Well, he was not even undercover boss, but he was the CEO who forced his executives actually to pick out of a hat a piece of paper, and the piece of paper had the job they were going to have at Southwest Airlines for several weeks. And he was part of it too. So he's done everything. He was a flight attendant. He worked carrying luggage He worked, sweeping. And when he was doing this, people knew who he was, and he would dress the part and everything. But also, he would ask them what works, what doesn't, etc. So in terms of leading, I always think of him personally. Here's a quote from him, and this quote is going to be about corporate culture, which is we're going to talk about at the end of the slide. If you create an environment where the people truly participate, you don't need control. They know what needs to be done, and they do it. And the more that people will devote themselves to your cause on a voluntary basis, a willing basis, the fewer hierarchies and control mechanisms you need. I mean, that's huge because, this definition from your author about leading is good. It's solid. It's a standard one. I see usually other definitions include a very specific word, and the word is inspire. That a great leader is someone who inspires others to perform. And so that you have that, and that people just wanted to go the extra mile for Herb. The example I gave you at the very top of the lecture, which was a question I posed, which was asking you if you would work for free. The reason I asked that is because that's what saved Southwest Airlines. So he did that. He was on the block. The company was having issues, and he said to the employees, look, we can be around a lot more than we think we can, but we need your help. And people did it. The employees that could donated their times, and as they say, the rest is history. There was another interesting little factoid about Southwest Airlines for a while. I don't know if it's still true, but they used to say the hardest thing to do at Southwest Airlines is to get a promotion. And the reason is that nobody leaves. People love their jobs and they don't leave. Even though other airlines might pay better, they stay. All right, so that's for leading. So the process of guiding, motivating others toward the achievement of organizational goals. A leader can be anyone in an organization. That's really important. So here we're talking about the CEO of the company, but people have leadership roles based on how they behave and what kind of power they harvest for themselves. We'll talk about that in just a second. So again, regardless of the position, they're able to influence others to act or follow, often by their own voice. So power is the ability to influence others to behave in a particular way. And we have this notion of power, which is probably legitimate power or even coercive power, which is derived from someone's position in an organization. So legitimate power is, I'm the boss, I said so, you got to do it. That's it. Legitimate power. Reward power is, again, someone who's empowered to give people rewards. Could be anything. Coercive is, if you don't do it, this bad thing will happen. That's coercive power. Expert power. This is one that I always think about Bill Gates. When he founded Microsoft, he was coding, and he was a very talented coder. And it was interesting because even when he started to Microsoft was growing and starting to have a lot more employees, there were stories about him loving to sit with coders and helping them troubleshoot problems because he had that expert power. And so, by the way, that created a lot of respect. Referent power, the personal charisma, the respect, admiration. So again, it's something not because of legitimate or, especially not coercive, but you really like the person. You want to go the extra mile for them. Again, that's what we talked about at the top of the lecture. Empowerment, think about Nordstrom. If you've been to Nordstrom, they're in every case study out there. When you want to return something, they're empowered to take it back and give you the money, right? Think about other scenarios where you've been to these other companies and you want to return something or you have a unique request, and it's a very big deal. They have to call someone and they have to come in and they have the special magic key and you have to kind of wait for them, and the customer is getting annoyed and they ask again what's going on. The customer has to explain all of that because that cashier or sales clerk has not been empowered to execute that transaction. And so it's one of those things that really demoralizes. It hurts quality. It even hurts business because if you have a choice between going to return something, if you have a choice to go to a business where they make it easier for you to return stuff and one where it's always such a big deal, it's not going to happen, right? And so that's empowerment, right? The increased autonomy and discretion to make their own decision, as well as control over the resources needed to implement those decisions. I'm going to tell you about a company in just a little bit where the CEO of the company decided to give his employees power and control. They even set their own salary. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine working for a company where you get to set your own salary, your own schedule, you even give yourself your own title? We'll find out a little bit who that is. All right. GE. This is not in your book, and so there's a little blurb about GE, but that's it. This is my personal favorite definition of leadership, right? So Jack Welch, former CEO of General Electric, used to call it the 4 E's wrapped in a P, right? And GE used that tool to evaluate managers. I mean, look at the evaluation curve here. So with the 4 E's and 1 P, it was vitality curve is what they called it. This is from his book, Jack Welch, that he published in 2001. It was his first book after he retired. And basically what he did with this tool, the vitality curve is how vital are you? That's what vitality means in this case. How vital are you? And the way that he ranked the company was very unpopular. His nickname was Neutron Jack. Some people call this, what I'm showing you now, rank and yank. And the way that he did it is that the top 20 people who worked for the company were the outliers. They were amazing and they get to have all the goodies, the rewards, the bonuses, the whatever. And then in the middle, you had the 70%. They were vital, the vital 70%. But then the bottom 10, they were here. And he was infamous because he had a policy called the 20-70-10 right here, where each year, listen to this, each year he fired 10% of the company. And I always think about the guy who was like right here, Anyway, but and then remember that if you're actually at the bottom 70%, once the 10% gets gone, you've now moved over here. You have 1 year to make sure you're back somewhere, hopefully further away. Anyway, so now that I've explained to you what he did, how did he identify these people? So he came up with this little tool, this little technique that he had called the 4 E's wrapped in a P. So first of all, P stands for passion. And he was famous for saying that he would rather hire someone, he would rather hire someone who is exhibiting a lot of passion during the job interview. He would rather hire that person than someone perhaps with more experience, more qualifications, but not so high on the passion. And the reason he said that is because I can teach you the skill. I can teach you the know-how. I can give you the experience. I can't teach you passion. That's it. And I love that. And I know that when I've been on hiring committees, that's one of the driving forces for me behind some of the selections. And I know most of my colleagues agree with me. All right, so G, starting the system. We have now the E's. What are those 4 E's? So the person has to have energy. And some people, they just, again, you just see it. They have it. They show up and they have it. But having energy is not enough. Are you able to energize others? So that's the second one. You have energy, but you're able to energize others. And this goes back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago, the leadership. Are you able to inspire others, right? Energize others. Edge. That there's something about you. And, the example that is used is that you're not afraid of being unliked because of your decisions, right? You're not afraid of people not being happy with you because you're making unpopular decisions. And from what I remember, this is the one where sometimes they would say a lot of managers would have the 3 E's, but they were lacking the 4th E, And the fourth E was edge. I mean, who is okay as a manager? You're trying to inspire all these workers. You're trying to get them to be highly, highly productive. And of course, it's going to matter to you if they're unhappy with you. And so you're going to try to avoid that. And then lastly, execution. And so this was the manager who says, yes, I need, I can come back to me in 1 month with more data before we make a decision. And G was used to have a reputation of doing things before everybody else, right? And G did a lot of things, right, and still does. They, think nuclear power plants, think massive power plants, think locomotives, all that stuff, right? They were the ones that won the contract in Brazil to build locomotives in Brazil, right? And so what I'm saying here is that sometimes you're going to gamble a little bit. You are going to say yes to something where you don't have enough data. But in this case, he would rank a manager by virtue of, I'd rather you just do this and you be right than have us miss a window of opportunity because you needed more research. All right, the leadership styles. And so here we have 3 leadership styles, right? We have the autocratic style and the democratic, consensual, consultative, participative style, and the free rein, laissez-faire style, right? And if you look at the amount of authority in terms of style of manager, the autocratic style is basically the leadership style of manager, meaning that the authority is all on the manager. The manager makes all the decisions, whatever. And then the free rein is the opposite way. Here, the amount of authority is held by the individuals, the group members, the subordinates, right? And so I'm sure this is really not super complicated here. Think about an autocrat, right? Think about like a dictator or whatever. Manager makes most decisions and acts in an authoritative manner. They're concerned about subordinates. Emphasis is on getting tasks accomplished. Approaches used widely by military officers and some production line supervisors. And it sounds like, oh man, that's not what I want. Some industries it works. I'll talk later on about a guy who turned around IBM, Lou Gerstner, and he was known for being that kind of a leader. He was unapproachable. He had the corner office, and that was it. And then, the free rein is the complete opposite of that, right? They turn over virtually all authority and control to group. I believe, to a great extent, Google runs that way, right? And when you think about the, Google website, and you think about the search box. I can't find one today. I don't have one. I always forget what it's called. Doodle. I think it's the Google Doodle. Let's see. Google Doodle. There we go. So the Google Doodle is fascinating. So you've seen those before, right? That's the Google Doodle. So at the top of the Google page, so here, now ahead of time. Actually that's 2013 Thanksgiving. So, you go there and it's a great way to celebrate things and even educate people, about something. So they're really pretty cool. The reason I'm showing you this is because here, Children's Day in the Philippines. Some countries have Children's Day, right? I know that in Japan, right? Same thing. And so the cool thing about the Google Doodle is that this was not a top-down decision. This was not an autocratic style where, the CEO said, we really, we've done a lot of research and we need this. It's the other way around. It's two, if I remember the story well, 2 employees who thought about that, and they're completely empowered, and they were able to acquire the time and the budget, and they decided to do it, and now they run their own division. And so, it pays off in some industries, namely IT. Participative, I just think, we're in the middle here. The manager is concerned about subordinates, their ideas and attitudes. But the approach is just a little, it's democratic, it's a little bit of both. They share the decision making, and so they really together, it's the manager and the employees, right? So I hope you appreciate the 3 very, very different ways, right? So let's see what happens when you have a free rein, laissez-faire style leader. I told you earlier that there's someone who decided to have his employees just pretty much run the place and make all the decisions, including the salary and everything. So let's see if we can figure out who that is. So I have a little 5 minute, I think it's 5 or 3 minute clip. It's Tony Hsieh. He is a free reign. I gave him the Free Reign Leader Award. Tony Hsieh is such a fascinating guy. He wrote a book about his experience as a CEO of Zappos. You guys have heard of Zappos. It's the online shoe company. What he did with Zappos was spectacular, and his book is fascinating. It's called Delivering Happiness. Here's a brilliant guy at Harvard, gets out, he's a coder, and he's bored, and anyway, he makes a lot of money selling this idea, or not idea, sorry, he had created this online feature and sold it and made millions. Very young age, and decided to invest. So he created this company where he was basically an angel investor and would help these startups. And this other guy comes up to him and says, look, I'm a buyer for Nordstrom, and I'm thinking about creating a company where we can sell shoes online. Everyone has said no to me. They said no to me because they said that buying shoes is one of those experiences where you want to try them on and you want to kind of feel them, and you can't just buy them by clicking online. And besides, if you did that, you would get killed just on the cost of returns. It would never work. And so Tony Hsieh thought, this is such a great challenge, and the more he thought about it, the more he had ideas, and so he decided that, in fact, he spent his entire fortune, almost went bankrupt. I recommend you read the book if you want to read a really cool book about a CEO. Tony Hsieh started this company and then sold it to Amazon, and the caveat was that he has to stay in charge. So this is about Zappos and the concept that not concept, but it is a concept that he implemented at Zappos called Holacracy, and this explains to you a little bit what it is.
It is hot. It is hot here right now.
Hey, what's going on? It's Chris from Wistia. Today we're going to be hanging with Zappos to learn about how they've built an epic company culture that is the core driver of their business, and how they've built this strong culture from the ground up.
Some companies talk about work-life separation or work-life balance, and for us, our approach is really to focus on work-life integration, because at the end of the day, it's just life.
The Zappos culture is unlike anything else I've ever seen. We joke that it's happier than Disney.
It's like a family. It's like this big family, and we're happy to see each other. We come to work, we enjoy it, and we have fun here.
Company culture is our main business strategy. It's the number one priority of the company.
I think that we've always felt that competitors could copy our selection, they can copy our shipping, but one thing that could never be copied was our company culture.
From the very beginning, Fred and I interviewed every single person, but our criteria was really, would we want to go grab a drink with this person, even if we weren't in business together? And if the answer was no, then we just wouldn't hire that person.
That's kind of the idea behind the way that we hire here, is it's more important that we're getting the right people, the people that are going to fit into our culture, that are going to appreciate our culture, help grow our culture.
Performance reviews include whether you're living or inspiring the core values in others. But
all right, control. And so, by the way, if right now, if you'd like, you just think about kind of recall the 4 functions of management, right? This is going to be critical. You are business majors. It's one of those things you have to memorize them. It's just part of the deal. The management has 4 functions: plan, organize, lead, control. That's it, and they work together, and you have to have all 4. And they're symbiotic. You can't have them independent of one another. They work together. So control is it's critical. The process of assessing the organization's progress toward accomplishment of its goal. Its goal includes monitor the implementation of a plan and correct deviation from that plan. Think about your situation as a student. So you study for the first exam, and you spent a couple hours. Let's say that every day you spend 30 minutes, and you have studied 30 minutes a day. You read the book. You highlight what you see as key definitions, and you follow the lecture. You take notes during lecture. You refer to your book. You have your notes with your book. Anyway, you take the first exam and you get a B minus. So then what, right? So let's kind of look at the control process right here on the right, which by the way is a closed loop. A closed loop means that it just goes on forever, right? So you set performance standard and goals. So I just gave you the performance standard, 30 minutes per day. You highlight the book and you watch the presentations and the PowerPoints, and you take the exam, and now you got a B minus. So you measure your performance, right? And once you've measured the performance, this is a B minus. You compare your actual performance to established performance standard. And so this is when you say, look, I got a B minus, but I want an A. I didn't want a B minus, right? So you take corrective action. You focus, okay, where did I go wrong? What answers did I miss? How did I miss them? Was it because I missed the application questions? So when you look at the exam, you will have some questions that are going to be, lower level learning, definition based, and the higher level learning are going to be the application questions, the more strategy involved in business in terms of making sure that you're able to look at a situation, a problem, pick the right strategic tool, apply that strategic tool correctly, and then identify. So all of those things, right? So what does that mean? You take the corrective actions, right? So maybe 30 minutes is not enough. Maybe now you have to do 1 hour. Maybe you realize that you skimped out on a couple of definitions. So now all of a sudden you think, flashcards, I got to get my definitions out of the way. And then you use the information gained from the process to set up performance standards. So from now on, it's 1 hour. These are your performance. You set those performance standards and goals based on that information, and then you take exam 2 and you measure that performance again, and this goes on forever, right? There are other ones. There's if you like, let me just throw this at you now because we won't really talk about it at this level. The Deming wheel is its common name. It's also known as the Shewhart wheel, but it's a PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act. It's what made General Electric one of the global leader in terms of in aerospace, as with jet engine. In fact, I like this one better. Let me do this one. This is perfect. This here is the continuous improvement wheel. There we go. This is what continuous improvement looks like, right? So you plan, you do, you check, you act, right? You have your standard over here, right? So this is kind of like what we just did. You have your standard, by the way, not in the book, but really good to know. This is your standard. You plan, you do, you check, you act. And then you, over here, through standardization, you're resetting those standards. So you had the initial standard, and now you are modifying the standard with time and improving it, right? And then you do it again. Plan, do, check, act. So this wheel here goes on forever over time. The more you do it, the better the quality. Imagine Toyota and Honda, after World War II, around 47, 48, we, the United States, sent an American American statistician, Dr. W.E. Deming, to Japan after World War II to do the post-war census. And he introduced that in Japan. He also tried to introduce it in the U.S. And GE, was a big fan of Deming, and they listened. But a lot of companies thought, we don't need it. So the reason I'm telling you this is that if Toyota is going to come up a lot in management, if you want for fun, grab any management book and look at the index, the table, the index, and look under T for Toyota, and you're going to be surprised how much Toyota there is in the best management books. And that's because Toyota pioneered so much in operations, and a lot of the stuff they learned from Dr. Deming. Which, this is my segue right here. Toyota uses, and this is from your author in this book, uses a simple but effective control system on its auto assembly line. Each worker serves as the customer for the process just before his or hers. Each worker is empowered, remember that term from earlier, to act as quality control inspector. If a part is defective or not installed properly, the next worker won't accept it. You know, there are companies where that's discouraged. There are assembly lines where that's discouraged. And think about it. You're running an assembly line, you're trying to make a car, and think how much money you're going to be losing when people are sitting around because one employee is stopping the entire line for a defect, right? What we'll talk about in the future is cost and how we look at cost. Are we looking at cost in the short term or the long term? And so Toyota has always looked at cost in the long term. We don't want to make a defective car because in the long term it would hurt our reputation. Lots of other companies are looking at cost in the short term. I can't stop the assembly line, it's going to cost me a fortune, but that's going to hurt their reputation. Any worker can alert the supervisor with a problem by tugging on a rope. It's called the end-on cord. This is not in the book, I just want you to know. End-on cord, which is a Japanese word which has to, basically means like characters on a paper, right? It's anyway, it's a label type thing. So end-on cord that turns on a warning light, it gives them feedback. If the problem isn't corrected, the worker can stop the entire assembly line. I was just telling you about that. To me, that's fascinating. So this is the actual Toyota line. I believe this is a Prius, and that's what the cord looks like right there. All right, moving on. By the way, real quick, there's a great book out there called The Toyota Way, and it was written by a consultant with permission from Toyota. I don't know, it came out about over 10 years ago. But if you really want to look at continuous improvement in the auto industry, and Toyota is the benchmark and has trained even its competitors. Not all, but some. Okay, now we're getting into the managerial skills. I was telling you about this guy earlier, Lou Gerstner. He was the guy who has the corner office, very not very approachable, very kind of almost like military guy, right? Top-down control command. And so the reason I have him here is because he's a fascinating guy. So he saved IBM, and I'll kind of give you a little bit of background on that. You know, IBM, once upon a time, a computer company. And I say once upon a time because, yeah, IBM stands for International Business Machines, and this is a company that sold computers, right? Well, what was fascinating about IBM is around the 80s and 90s, just think, you know, 84 is a big year. Apple is releasing its computers, and Microsoft with you know, Office, Microsoft Office, and MS-DOS just prior to that. You know, it's a very big year. There's lots of competition. IBM is no longer the big baddie. You know, there's just a lot of other companies just popping up. And what's fascinating is that there's a lot of competition from hardware as well. Compaq is a company that was created making computers where they actually reversed engineers IBM computers to make their computers. So what I'm telling you is this. What I'm telling you is that when this guy was hired, IBM was in huge trouble. They were becoming irrelevant. People were no longer interested in them alone as a source of computers. There were so many other choices. And so when he came in, a lot of people said, that's it, that company's dead. It's like an elephant, you know, you can't teach an elephant to dance now, can you? And that's what he called his book, Who Says Elephants Can't Dance? Because that's what he did. He was able to, you know, think about that picture I showed you at the beginning of the lecture about that ship, the big ship on the calm ocean. So he turned that as much as he could into whitewater rafting, right? That's kind of what he did. And so what's fascinating about him, and now I can really focus on why I'm telling you about him, is that prior to working for IBM, the guy was with Nabisco, you know, like food company, cookies and stuff, Nabisco. And a lot of people would think like, what? That's crazy. He doesn't know anything about computers. And he was in finance. I believe he was with American Express for a while. And here he is now with IBM. What? So why did they hire him? And this is where we're looking into managerial skills. And they hired him obviously because of his conceptual skill. The guy really was crazy good at the big picture stuff. He understood, he's a visionary, he understood strategy, he understood which way the wind was blowing and we have to get there before the next person. Human skills equally important. Notice technical skill, there it is, it's missing completely. So question, did Lou Gerstner even have to know how a computer worked? No. People, as long as they were able to explain to him this is what we need and how it works, whatever. But, besides, he just made the company more relevant. Today, IBM is one of the biggest consulting firms in the computer industry. Middle management, of course, human skill, and a little bit of conceptual, a little bit of technical. Supervisory, first line, no conceptual at all. Why? Remember, it's almost day-to-day stuff. So yeah, human for sure, and technical, very much so. All right, now, let's see exactly what he did. So I added this. This is from MBI Concepts Corporation. I got it from the internet. And so it's showing you the market value of IBM from 1920 to 2018. It is insane. Look what happens, right? Pretty flat. In the 60s, all right, there we go. 70s, 80s, and what do we have here? Bam! You see right there? Acres, right? So right around here, IBM is done. It is dust, right? It is really, really not looking good. And so when you look over here for millions of dollars for the market capitalization rate, that company is, not worth that much. Look at what happened with Lou Gerstner when he came in. This is his tenure right here. This is Lou Gerstner. And then this dip, I can't remember. The recession? Anyway, no, that was after. I'll have to look. But anyway, this was the greatest gain in the history of the company. This is the reinvention of IBM under Lou Gerstner. He really truly was a turnaround artist, and his main skill is the conceptual skill. All right. Well, that's the conclusion of our chapter. Yep, that's it. That was it. So I want to remind you that there's more to this. When you take your management class, you are going to, especially with all of the 4 functions will have their own respective chapters, right? So leadership has its own chapter. In fact, planning often will have more than one chapter. You'll have a basic chapter on planning, and then you'll get into more strategy and strategic planning. Anyway, just to let you know, I give you the essence, and I hope I brought you enough in terms of application, examples, and that you've enjoyed this lecture. All right, you guys, so what I'll do is I'll post this to the site with the slides. Remember, the slides are on Canvas. Your assignment will be up soon, and I will base parts of your assignment on the lecture to make sure that it helps you already kind of really bring the stuff in and study. Have a great day.